So, I have a glitch story that some could look at and equate as a potential false memory, or something that my brain just made up when I was younger. But I've always had a fantastic memory, and I know for a fact that all of this happened how I remember it. On top of that, and something that I find interesting, every single time I try to think about this or tell this story to someone, I start to get this weird feeling that I'm about to have a panic attack, which almost feels as if the Matrix, or whatever it is that controls our simulated reality, is trying to get me to forget the old timeline and accept this new one. That said, I remember all of this as it actually happened, and I refuse to be pushed into some alternative timeline that isn't true. This happened back when I was 12, which was about 10 years ago. Now, I know that some of you may say, you were a kid, so you probably just don't remember it, right? But I promise you that I remember all of this very vividly, in an intricate detail. At this point, my family lived in a small house in Missouri. I'm not going to say where specifically for security reasons. It was just myself, my parents, and my brother, and we were fairly separated from most of our family, with the exception of our aunt on our mother's side. The start of this whole event happened when my paternal grandmother passed away. It was the end of June, and my brother and I were out of school for the summer when my parents got a call. Apparently, my grandmother had died unexpectedly and suddenly in her sleep, and my grandfather was trying to figure out everything in a panic. The problem was that, as stated, his only son, my father, lived in Missouri, and they lived in upstate New York. At this point, my dad makes a firm decision that he needs to fly up north to help his father take care of everything, and my mom says she's going to go with him, as he would need the emotional support. It was decided that my brother and I would stay with my aunt in St. Louis while my parents flew out to New York to take care of my grandfather and my grandmother's affairs. Here's what I remember happening. I remember my aunt coming to get my brother and I. I remember loading my stuff into the car alongside my brother, and I remember telling my parents goodbye. I specifically remember telling my parents that I hoped they enjoyed New York. I remember this because it was something stupid to say. They were going for a funeral. They weren't going to enjoy it at all. Anyways, after that, I remember getting in the car with my aunt, and as we were driving, my aunt tells us that we were going to go to Six Flags during the week we were staying there. I remember being incredibly excited for it, and I remember the two of us genuinely having an amazing time with my aunt and uncle, going on all the rides, and that I specifically loved the roller coasters. Overall, it was probably the best week of my childhood. We got to spend time with my aunt and uncle. They didn't have kids, so they spoiled us. We got to go to Six Flags and really just had a great week that summer. When we got home, my parents were already back at the house, and I know I've said this a few times, but I specifically remember that my father gave me a snow globe that had the skyline of New York. this globe was absolutely gorgeous, and that I genuinely loved everything about it. It was one of my prized possessions as a child, and I kept it on a shelf. I never really touched it, but I always knew it was there, and I genuinely loved it. Now, here's where the glitch, or timeline shift, or whatever occurs. When I hit 19, I was ready to move out of the house and into my own apartment. A friend of mine and I had saved up the money to pay what we needed. We both had a steady job for our age, and we were excited to move forward with our lives. When I was packing up my room and boxing away all my stuff, I got to the point where I was clearing off my shelf, and I paused. There were various little knickknacks, items, trophies from school, but no snow globe. I just kind of sat there and stared for a moment, trying to think about where I could have put what I considered to be one of my most cherished items as a child. I called my mom into my room, and I asked her if she or Dad had moved my snow globe to another shelf in the house, or if they had seen it. My mom then asks me what snow globe I'm talking about. I tell her the one that she and Dad got me from when they went to New York. My mother just stares at me confused and says that she and Dad had never been to New York. When she said this, I started to feel incredibly strange inside, almost like that panic attack feeling I mentioned before. I stepped down from the ladder and tried to ask if she was feeling okay and if she had forgotten when the two of them went to New York when Grandma died. She again asked what I was talking about. I called my dad into the room and tried to talk to him about it, and he was just as confused, saying they never went to New York ever. I tell them that when I was 12, Grandma passed away, and Grandpa was panicking because he didn't know what to do. I said that the two of them flew to New York to help him out, and my aunt came to get my brother and I, and we stayed with her in St. Louis, and that we all went to Six Flags while we were there. Then it got even more confusing. My dad's face twisted into genuine confusion, and he said, "Yes, when you were 12, my mother passed away unexpectedly, but they lived in Chicago. We drove you to your aunt's house on the way there. She didn't come and get you." So now, with this said, I live in a timeline where my grandparents lived in Chicago and not New York. In this timeline, my aunt also didn't come get us. My parents supposedly drove us to St. Louis on their way to Chicago. They never brought back a snow globe, and they drove. They didn't fly. I don't understand how any of this is possible when I have a very vivid memory of the situation, and I recall having that snow globe my entire childhood. What's really weird is that I cannot recall the last time I actually saw the snow globe, and I'm struggling to remember anything past getting it and putting it on my shelf. And every time I think about it, the memories are foggy, and I start to get that anxious feeling. Like I said, I know this may be incredibly mundane to others, but to me, it's one of the creepiest things that has ever happened.